This is Comcast Local Edition. I'm Jack Hansen. We're here on the USS Hornet. This is a floating museum in Alameda, and Rolf Sabye is with us right now. He was involved in the Apollo program to pick up those astronauts, and they came back from the moon. What a fantastic job that was. Tell me about your role.
I was a quartermaster at the time, and this was for Apollo 11 and Apollo 12. I worked up on the bridge, and my primary responsibility was navigation, but some of us were qualified to steer the ship as well. And during the Apollo recoveries, there were 4 of us that had trained for several days, almost a week and a half actually, to learn how to bring the ship up next to the capsule in order to recover it after the astronauts had been removed.
And when you say next to it, this means don't run it over.
That meant don't run it over. That's right, exactly.
Yeah. And how much did you practice prior to that time?
We practiced several times a day, and we also practiced at night, just in case the recovery time had changed to where, for some necessity, it became a night recovery.
Okay, describe the recovery to us.
Well, the recovery itself, we had, on Apollo 11, we didn't actually see the splashdown because there was cloud coverage. So on that one, after the astronauts were on board, we brought the ship down towards the capsule and up alongside the capsule and picked it up. Apollo 12 for us was more spectacular because it was a beautiful clear morning. We had been told in advance where we would see the capsule, which was off the port bow, not too far away actually. And when the chutes opened up, it was very clear. A lot of us got some great photographs, those that were able to be out on the wing and out on the flight deck. And again, once the astronauts were safely on board the ship, then we brought the ship down next to the capsule and picked it up.
Was everybody standing on the deck of the ship to see these men who came back from the moon? There must have been a lot of excitement at that point.
There really was, and there were quite a few people standing up on the forward corner of the flight deck in an area that had been secured for them to be able to do that, because the helicopter would have come mid-deck once they landed. And there was a great cheer. You could hear it coming up from the flight deck and elsewhere on the ship as well, I'm sure. So.
How close to the capsule were you?
We were probably within about 1.5 miles to 2 miles on 12. We were about 11 miles away on 11.
So the helicopter left from here, went over there.
That's correct.
Got them, picked up the men, and so forth, and brought them back to the ship.
That's right.
So forth. When the men arrived back on the ship, what was the response from the crew?
Well, for Apollo 11, it was much more restricted, of course. The crew were standing in hangar bay and waiting, and also up on the island area, those that were able to be up there were standing along what we called Vulture's Row and kind of watching the activities.
Vulture's Row.
Along with
That's
the
one
president.
of those clever Navy names,
exactly,
right?
I'm sure. But along with the president and some other dignitaries watching the activities on the flight deck. When the helicopter came down, they were almost rushed into the capsule. They were wearing their environmental suits. And then, of course, the ceremonial activities began.
You were mentioning, excuse me interrupting you, but we want to mention was President Nixon.
That's right.
Who was, I think, the only president who ever was involved in the landings.
I believe that to be the case. That's right.
Yeah. And was he smiling?
He was really excited. He had come up to the bridge for a few minutes prior to the launch, or splashdown, I should say, and talked to us a little bit, and then went down one level where you've probably seen the photograph of him standing there watching the activities.
I have.
And he had a grin. He really did. He seemed really genuinely excited.
Yeah. And was this the high point of your life?
Well,
in one sense.
You know, when you look back, I have to admit that it was, to a certain extent, but it was just a period of time that I certainly remember, and I'm proud that I was part of it.
Yeah, and of course this floating museum brings people in here to sort of relive the times when the Apollo program was going so successfully. And this module behind us, for example, is the one that you didn't want to run over. This is the type. This is not the same one. This one came from the Smithsonian at one time, and this was used as a test model that was came around space and went around the Earth 3 times and so forth. It was dropped and survived, and now it's here on the USS Hornet for everyone to see.
That's right. It's a good example of the Apollo space program. We're excited to have it aboard. And this capsule was actually picked up by the Hornet in 1966, of course, when it did come back. And so there are a lot of things about this capsule that are similar to what we did for Apollo 11 and 12. Brings back memories of seeing it. It also gives you an idea of the size of the ship compared to the capsule when we brought this ship up next to it that we didn't want to knock into it. So.
Great to have you, Rolf. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
It's Comcast Local Edition. I'm Jack Hansen aboard the USS Hornet.